Simuel. For Bird, he was just one of the skeletons in the closet Big Mama said we all had.
Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? How are you guys feeling? Now in this video we're going to talk about why Bird deserved better, okay? Why Simuel was the right man in soul food for Bird. If you ask me, we are about to get into this topic. We really about to get into some things, y'all. Okay.
See, if you had to come to me, I would have given it to you.
Now let's get into it. Now, when we talk about, soul food, everybody wants to focus on, the food, the drama, the family. But let's talk about Bird for a second, because I honestly believe Bird made the wrong choice when she married Lem.
See, that's what she get. Dragging somebody in who ain't got nothing and putting him off on family.
I mean, I think her life would have, gone a whole lot different. Some would say better. It would have been in a different direction if she had chosen Simuel instead, in my humble opinion. He was fine as hell, and I feel as though that was the right guy for her, okay?
Simuel St. James, Chief Executive of Sales and Marketing.
Now let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Breaking down the Bird versus Lem versus Simuel, okay? We have to talk about it. Now, Lem, had a past. Everybody knows that now. A real one, okay? He had just gotten out of prison and was trying to find his footing, right? And yes, we can all appreciate a redemption, arc and the entire situation with that. But let's be real. Bird wasn't in a position to carry a man, just humbly, and that's what ended up happening. She was carrying that man, she was constantly covering for him.
When you need me, call me.
Making sacrifices and walking on eggshells to protect his fragile ego. Now let's talk about Simuel, right? He wasn't perfect. He was a little bit arrogant, okay? He was arrogant, boastful, maybe even a little condescending. But that man was a businessman, okay? Financially stable, well-dressed, confident, and most importantly, he had his life together, okay? That's the type of man Bird, would have been the best with, in my humble opinion, with her looks, her ambition, her position, like everything. She just deserved better, someone who could actually meet her where she was. Or even elevate her, the tension between Bird and Simuel. Let's just get into that, okay? The connection, all of that, okay? There's a real chemistry between Bird and Simuel, He was clearly attracted to her, and Bird knew how to handle him. She didn't shrink in front of him, but, you could tell that he made her feel something, maybe a little insecure, maybe like she wasn't enough,
I see Terry finally got up off the dime and gave you the money to open up your lift shop.
Terry didn't give me anything. It was an investment.
And while that can kind of be toxic in some cases, in Bird's case, I think it challenged her to grow. Simuel wasn't just a love interest, okay? He was a mirror, He forced her to confront how she saw herself and what, she expected out of life. He was like the male version of her sister Terry, in my humble opinion, Just a little cold, blunt, financially successful, confident, and that scared her.
I'm like you. I'm from the hood too. But you see, I make $80,000 a year because I was always willing to sacrifice whatever I had to in order to get what I wanted.
Maybe because it reminded her of how often she had to run to Terry for help. Dependency, a partner, just, I don't know. I think that this man was the one, okay? And that's another thing, right? Bird didn't want to feel like she was, depending on someone again. She already leaned on Terry, her sister, and that clearly wore her down, and it wore down their relationship. But in a marriage, isn't that what your partner is supposed to be for you? Someone you can depend on, without it being a burden.
But at what cost?
How much are you willing to sacrifice?
Nothing.
But instead of choosing the man who could support her, challenge her, help her grow, she chose someone she felt like she had to build up. And that cost her peace, time, her own sense of self, I honestly think that man was just too much headache, too much with his lengthy record. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I'm just being honest.
got caught selling a little something, something.
She could do better. She could have done a lot better. And let's not forget Big Mama, right? As loving and powerful as she was, she came from a different time, a time where women often settled for what was available. Her own husband had a gambling problem. Big Mama talked about that. So when Bird brought home Lem with a criminal record, it was easy for Big Mama to say, oh, that's okay. She normalized struggle love. And in doing so, she must have encouraged her daughter to lower her standards.
He paid his debt to society and is no different from Daddy in his gambling.
You see, in life, we all make some bad choices. My husband was gambling, and yeah, he was bad at it. In fact, we almost lost this house. But I worked on my hands and knees, cleaning up after white folks, taking in laundry. See, you do what you have to do to stay strong, save the family, even if you stumble trying.
But that's the thing. Just because it was normal doesn't mean it was right, That generational mindset told Bird that you take what you can get. But Bird didn't have to just live like that, She could have just done better. She had better options, She had Simuel, if you ask me.
Man, me and old Cola, we go way back.
I really believe that if Bird had chosen Simuel, the whole trajectory of her life would have been different. Yeah, it would have been harder in some ways, maybe more emotionally challenging, maybe less romantic, maybe, because that bad boy romance is like a whole nother thing.
She spent more time getting her shot together. Instead of following Lem around, maybe she'd pay me back that loan.
But better, in my humble opinion. She would have had stability. She would have had someone who could pour into her, who would have, saved her, But Bird didn't. She needed a project. And that's what Lem was. Lem was a project,
Who the fuck is Cola? Oh, no. That's just a little something, I used to call her back in the day. Since she got that body shaped like a Coca-Cola bottle, huh?
She didn't need a project. She needed a partner, somebody that she could stand by, that could stand by her, The entire movie, from the beginning to the end of the movie, even when he got out of jail, he needed strings from her sister to get out of jail.
Got fired from my job.
What do you mean you got fired? What, you can't take work in a 9 to 5? You got in trouble again?
Oh, no. Got fired because I lied on my application about being convicted.
And you felt like you couldn't tell me that?
It seemed like she just picked a harder route, I get it. You might like the romance. I get it. You might have to deal with the project, but you know what they say about projects, that once they're put together, they're not going to choose you. When a person's in struggle, they kind of get what they can get, especially men. But when they're well off, or where they believe that they should be financially, living the life that they should, maybe you're not the woman that they're going to want,
It's about this stupid ass bullshit system. They lock you up and expect you to do something better with your life. But when you get out, there ain't nothing better, because the crackers that got everything don't give you a second chance.
Maybe he's dealing with Bird because he knows that she'll build him up while he struggles. But once he gets to a place where he feels like he's financially stable, who's to say he's going to pick Bird? Bird deserved better, in my humble opinion. She should have left him alone and got with Simuel, got married to Simuel, and been with a guy that was like her big sister Terry, somebody that can help her grow, somebody that is respected, somebody that's a man, in my humble opinion.
She used to just make it because I'm on the screen.
But that's all I'm going to say. I love you guys to pieces, and bye-bye.